Hello, my nerdy nog dogs. Thanks for tuning in. This is week 6 of our independent study. And in previous weeks, we were talking about slow changes on Earth, erosion, weathering. Now we're talking about fast changes. Last week was landslides. This week is earthquakes. That is a fast change on Earth. In Wednesday's lesson, in our live session, we had talked about different earthquakes. I was able to show you different events. What I want you to pay attention to now is I want you to turn on your thinking cap, and I want us to be thinking like an engineer, right? So let's get to our lesson. We're talking about tsunamis today because that's in our chapter on earthquakes, and I didn't get to present on tsunamis during our live lesson. So although we're talking about earthquakes, we're also talking about tsunamis, which can be caused by an earthquake. And we're going to focus on what engineers do to hopefully remedy, plan for, prevent, that sort of thing. So let's get after this. Okay, preparing for earthquakes. What sort of things do you do at home to prepare for an earthquake? I bet you guys have a lot of things in place. Do you have an earthquake kit at home? Do you have an evacuation plan? What about a family meeting spot or an emergency flashlight? There's these flashlights that just in case you run out of batteries, you can crank the handle and wind it and it'll store the energy. So cool. If you don't have one, you should get one for your emergency pack. Do you have extra water storage? These are all regular things that we do to plan for an earthquake. And as you guys learned in your Wednesday lesson, we're in earthquake country, right? Right up here on our peninsula, there's plenty of fault lines that run through the peninsula or just off the coast. There's the Inglewood fault line. There's the San Pedro fault line. There, of course, is the San Andreas fault line, which isn't too far from us. So we should always plan and prepare for these sort of things. Well, guess what? Just like we plan and prepare, engineers are always planning in advance for these sort of things. They want to keep us safe. So here's a picture of engineers. Do you see them? They look like little tiny wee ants down below. But this is them looking at construction and thinking about ways that they can build and plan more safely to protect people. So engineers are always thinking about that, because when we look at our earlier construction, this is a building from say 1910, maybe 1920. I don't have an exact date, but the architecture kind of looks that way. And as you see in an earthquake, it kind of collapsed upon itself. Okay, so engineers are always looking at ways to protect us and keep that from happening. Planning ahead, because we can't exactly plan for an exact time when an earthquake might strike. Here's other things that engineers do. And if you notice the upper left-hand corner, when an earthquake hits, what happens is that building or structure gets the vibration and starts to kind of move with the vibration, and the higher level sways at a greater force than down below. Now, if we're talking about a great big skyscraper, right? Like this skyscraper where my mouse is flowing around or flying around, the higher the building, the greater sway in an earthquake, okay? So engineers plan for this in advance. One technique they have used that has been functional is what they call rollers, putting a building on rollers. Now, it's not actually on a big rolling ball, but if you notice the building on the right-hand side, what they plan for is beneath the building, they plan for a certain amount of movement. And they have constructed it in a way that they call on rollers that allow the building to move with the vibration so that you don't get the swaying up top. A high rise is made of mostly steel. So steel can get very brittle. And if there's too much pressure on a building, it will collapse. We've talked about the Leaning Tower of Pisa and what an anomaly that is, considering the weight of that marble and it's constant tilt. So engineers plan in advance. I want you thinking like an engineer. I know that one of you will be a scientist, and I know that one of you will be an engineer, and I know that many of you will get into the field, and I need you guys thinking outside the box. Stay outside the box. Very important. We need our innovation. We need our innovators, and that's you guys. So, okay. Oh, did I tell you? I actually used to work in a high rise. If you see the photo that just came up, I was at the 555 Flower Building downtown Los Angeles for years. And when I was up there at nighttime and it was a windy night, I kid you not, you could feel the building sway with the wind. It was crazy. And it made the most beautiful sing-song. But that's a little side note. I like side notes. Okay. But yeah, really cool to be up that high in a building like that and to see all those engineering feats in place. Okay, if we look at smaller buildings, what this photo is showing you is how the vibration, especially in an earthquake, kind of travels up through the ground, right? Depending on how deep or how far down it was, because an earthquake can be a mile down, or it can be closer to the Earth's crust. Or to the surface of the Earth's crust. So it's showing you how the vibration travels through the ground, and what happens is that affects the structure and really makes the structure rattle and can cause damage to the structure. However, when engineers plan ahead, check out the second building. By placing and planning for a certain amount of movement, because we know here in Los Angeles, the Earth is always shaking, baby. If we plan for that and we create buildings and structures that can withstand a certain amount of movement or capture that vibration and move with that vibration, we will be more successful at keeping residents and people safe. Okay, so here's another really cool thing. Our bridges and our freeway systems already plan for such things. If you notice in these pictures, the joints between the different systems allow for a certain amount of movement. And that is because things are always moving here in LA. Check out this photo down below. In a severe earthquake, it's saying seismic movement level 2. I'm not sure what that level 2 would mean, but if you see the little tidbit down there, it shows you that those joints allow for some movement. Oh, rest assured, someone is looking after us, right? And planning ahead. Okay, so what does this mean for you? Ooh, tsunami, good place. I want to show you a little bit. Let me, oops, hold on, my friends. I need to stop that share, and I lost my video here. Okay, so back to me, my big head. I want to show you a little video that is going to explain tsunamis, because that was part of this chapter 5, lesson 2 earthquake section as well. Sometimes earthquakes have been known to cause a tsunami. So I have this great video, and keep your fingers crossed. I know sometimes our videos here can be glitchy. My fingers are crossed, my friends. If not, I will add this to our Teams page. But let's see how this turns out for us.
In 479 BC, when Persian soldiers besieged the Greek city of Potidaea, the tide retreated much farther than usual, leaving a convenient invasion route. But this wasn't a stroke of luck. Before they had crossed halfway, the water returned in a wave higher than anyone had ever seen, drowning the attackers. The Potidaeans believed they had been saved by the wrath of Poseidon. But what really saved them was likely the same phenomenon that has destroyed countless others, a tsunami. Although tsunamis are commonly known as tidal waves, they're actually unrelated to the tidal activity caused by the gravitational forces of the sun and moon. In many ways, tsunamis are just larger versions of regular waves. They have a trough and a crest, and consist not of moving water, but the movement of energy through water. The difference is in where this energy comes from. For normal ocean waves, it comes from wind. Because this only affects the surface, the waves are limited in size and speed. But tsunamis are caused by energy originating underwater, from a volcanic eruption, a submarine landslide, or most commonly, an earthquake on the ocean floor. caused when the tectonic plates of the Earth's surface slip, releasing a massive amount of energy into the water. This energy travels up to the surface, displacing water and raising it above the normal sea level. But gravity pulls it back down, which makes the energy ripple outwards horizontally. Thus, the tsunami is born, moving at over 500 miles per hour. When it's far from shore, a tsunami can be barely detectable since it moves through the entire depth of the water. But when it reaches shallow water, something called wave shoaling occurs. Because there is less water to move through, this still massive amount of energy is compressed. The wave's speed slows down while its height rises to as much as 100 feet. The word tsunami, Japanese for harbor wave, comes from the fact that it only seems to appear near the coast. If the trough of a tsunami reaches shore first, the water will withdraw farther than normal before the wave hits, which can be misleadingly dangerous. A tsunami will not only drown people near the coast, but level buildings and trees for a mile inland or more, especially in low-lying areas. As if that weren't enough, the water then retreats, dragging with it the newly created debris and anything or anyone unfortunate enough to be caught in its path. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami was one of the deadliest natural disasters in history, killing over 200,000 people throughout South Asia. So how can we protect ourselves against this destructive force of nature? People in some areas have attempted to stop tsunamis with seawalls, floodgates, and channels to divert the water. But these are not always effective. In 2011, a tsunami surpassed the flood wall protecting Japan's Fukushima power plant, causing a nuclear disaster in addition to claiming over 18,000 lives. Many scientists and policymakers are instead focusing on early detection, monitoring underwater pressure and seismic activity, and establishing global communication networks for quickly distributing alerts. When nature is too powerful to stop, the safest course is to get out of its way.
Very much. That was a video by Alex Gendler, but a great description of a tsunami, right? Okay, so here's what I want from you, my nerdy nog dogs, because I know you are always up to the task. My goal for you is to think like an engineer. And of course, I have an output page for you to do to establish just that. Okay, so thinking like an engineer. What I want you to do is think about these things that we've learned about in terms of earthquakes and whatnot, and how we could protect our housing now. And if we were back in the classroom. So if we were back in our classroom and we were to experience an earthquake, I want you to think of remember all the cabinets I had in the back, and I had some big tubs stacked up, and then I maybe had different things on the wall or shelving units. I want you to think about how, as an engineer, you could best protect us in case of an earthquake. I also want you to think big and outside the box. So if there was a possibility that you could build a new classroom, a safe classroom, what would that look like? Okay, so do get outside of just the basics, just our classroom 35. Think big, think about what engineers do to protect us from both an earthquake and a tidal wave. Luckily, we're kind of up on the hill. We might be safe from that tidal wave or from that tsunami. But I don't know if you guys have noticed, there are signs leading up from Pier Avenue, right, that say tsunami route. And that is because if ever we had a big enough earthquake, we could actually have a tsunami here in Southern California. It's kind of wild to think about. Okay, so think big, my nerdy nog dogs. I'm counting on you. And I know that you've got it in you. And I know that you guys are outside the box thinkers. With that, look for your output page, give it your best, and I can't wait to hear your design ideas. Mwah! Miss you guys.